Welcome back. Welcome back from that break. Yes. Someone was asking, is it a Ugandan thing? No, it's not a Ugandan thing. And it's not, basically, it's actually not an NSSF thing. Yes, we wanted to play for you those videos, but we are back. When Rebecca stepped on the stage, we had to go for a break. Allow me to introduce to you our panel of speakers today, and they're already seated. Some wanted a silent entry. Richard Biarugaba is here. Jean Mutabaz is here. Rebecca Kabugo is here, not in any order. And then we have Emmanuel Mwaka from ICEA. Thank you. This is the NSSF Financial Intelligence Program Graduation. As you've seen that on the videos that have been playing, this is a program that runs for 6 months per person, depending on how you're taking it. It could be online, it could be physical, but we do this for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, we get to give you a document that says you have undergone through personal finance management course. It's not that document that matters, it's the habits you take on from there. I don't want to delay you, or take you through all the stories. We'll have more of those from very, very equipped speakers today. As I said, Headmaster is my name, Apolombo is my name. I head the financial literacy program. People have been asking, I've seen the questions. Is it for everyone? Yes, everyone can attend. As NSSF, we are positioning ourselves as a provider that can change the entire nation. So whether you are our member or not our member, you are planning to be our member, we have something for you. Allow me to open this broadcast. Thank you for the online audience. Thank you for the people on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We thank you for your time. Allow me to call in a person more qualified than I am. In our classes, we call her the LC1 chairman, Rebecca Kabugo, to open. Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Apollo. Greetings to each and everyone. We are quite excited and delighted to host you this morning to our first ever virtual Customer Connect Week. Every graduate today, the fund, every graduate, we look at them as a child that we have journeyed with from point A to a certain point X in this program. And this program covers a lot of things. It includes online sessions, field trips, as well as classes where we cover different items and different pillars in financial management. To every graduate listening in, you will agree with me that if there's any takeaway at all from this program, it's the stark realization that getting to a place of wealth can be described as an algorithm or a law, or even better, an equation that will take you from point A to a certain point X. And I'll give an example. If we look at, for instance, the pillar of financial management called saving, we all know that if you put money away consistently over a period of time, that money will definitely grow. And that's an equation. And so it is with every other pillar under financial management. So with every pillar, you can put an equation to it, an algorithm to it, an instruction to it, or a law to it, and if you abide by it over a period of time, it will take you from one point to another. So our hope, even as we graduate, all the people that we are graduating today, our hope and prayer and belief is that each and every one of you listening in will make a financial revolution in your family, not just now, but even the people that will come after you, and the ones that will come after that, and the ones that will come after that. Gone should be the days when we had people say, and I've said this many times in the classes, please allow me to say it again, that my father used to be rich, my great-grandfather used to be rich, and whoever is saying that statement has nothing to show for it. Why? Because we have not looked at the psyche of money in terms of an equation where we see generational wealth passing on from one generation to another. The new narrative and our expectation for everybody who's graduating today is that they will point to you at that point in time. Many generations after you've gone past will point to you for that financial revolution, and they can actually show a curve of financial well-being that's positive from one point to another. And I'll ask you to allow me to say that again in the local lingo. Gone are the days, again, quote unquote, where we said that the jaja wange yali mugagga, oba tata wange yali mugagga. That should no longer be a narrative if you've been through this class. We would like the narrative to change too, again, because financial wellness can be an equation. We'd like the narrative to change too. Narinayo Jaja Becky, Narinayo Jaja Daudi, Narinayo Jaja Levi, and because of them, many years down the road, your children and your children's children can point to you for a financial revolution. Why? Because you've understood that the psyche of money can actually be looked at as an equation, an algorithm, an instruction, which if you obey over a period of time can actually move you from one point to another. So I thought that today I'll read us some laws of money from one of my favorite books on money, The Richest Man in Babylon. And every statement in there can actually be looked at as an equation. Start thy path to fattening, save money. Control thy expenditures, don't spend more than you need. Make thy gold multiply, invest wisely. Guard thy treasures from loss, avoid investments that sound too good to be true. Make of thy dwelling a profitable investment, own thy home. Ensure a future income, protect yourself with insurance or social security. Improve their ability to earn, strive to become wiser and more knowledgeable in money matters. Again, I'd like to say it again, and for me, it's the biggest takeaway in this program that many times we look at money, making money, money matters, and we think that you stumble into it, or you get it, or you're blessed. But one of the things for me as a student in financial literacy, and for the graduates today, is that you can look at money as simply an equation that you apply over a period of time and move yourself, move your family, move the generations after you from point A to a different point X, a beautiful point. So I am glad to invite somebody who I am very, very confident will be one of the richest judges in the time to come, that her children and her children's children will look up to her and say, because of Jaja Jean, Narinayo Jaja Jean, our family has actually understood wealth, generational wealth from one party, one family, one generation to another, and the next, and the next, and the next. Jean, you're most welcome. She's going to show us and tell us why the fund is impassioned about this program, why we are passionate about financial literacy. Jaja Jean, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'll get you for the Jaja part. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, our graduates. I am so excited that you are out there listening on this special day that we came up with, I think just about 1.5 years ago, when we dreamt that people should go to class for finances and graduate, and this is our second graduation. So thank you so much for coming, and I do hope that you enjoy the deliberations and bring other people on board for this very big deal thing for us at the fund. So I want to start off my presentation. I'm waiting for it to be flashed on the screen so we can do this together. Yes, so I'd like to tell you a story of why the fund is totally interested in financial literacy. So every time I do this, we'll do the clicker, or do I? Thank you, Apollo. So I'd like to start with a story of what our population is in Uganda, and many times you'll find this on Google or UBOS or whichever place you go, and you'll find that in 2018 we were estimated to be about 42.7 million people. What does that mean for us? It means we are very many Ugandans, and just a few of us are enjoying some kind of financial formatting or spaces where we can talk about money. What else do we know? We know that just about 12% of, we have a labor force of 17 million people, but just about 12% of those have some form of regulated savings. By regulated savings, we mean that only about just 2 million people in Uganda have savings where a regulator can determine how you spend or invest that money, and the rest is basically, the rest of the population that is working is managing their own retirement fund. What do I mean? If you're not in a regulated fund for your retirement, it means that if you own a shop in Chikubo, the money that you earn is going to take care of you. So the risks that you take are entirely on you. You have not basically diversified them into another space like other people that have regulated savings. So then what do we know about NSSF members? We do have about 1.32 million people in the NSSA. And those 1.32 million people have running balances. And how much do they have? And I think that's the biggest success story that we have at the fund. 1.32 million people have basically 13.6 trillion shillings. The power of compounding and the power of numbers. And we do in this program encourage people to work together when it comes to finances. Don't do things alone. Invest in groups. So 1.32 million people have 13.6 trillion. Simple averages, if you divide 13.6 trillion by 1.32 million people, everyone that saves with us should have just 1 million shillings. Can someone say that again? 1 million shillings. I wish I could see people's faces and ask, put up your hands now if you have 1 million shillings on you, and that's your retirement saving, yeah? What else did we find from the research that we did? We found that 56% of the people that we surveyed get financial advice from a household member or a family member or a friend. How crazy is that? What that means is that when we are making key investment decisions in our families, we go and ask our spouses of, honey, can I get a mortgage of 200 million? And your wonderful husband, who's never taken a financial class, says, yes, let's take it, let's do it. You get 200 million shillings, and then there comes the downhill story. Better still, you call your friend, should I buy a car now? And then they'll ask Ipsum or Wits. You say, I prefer an Ipsum, and there you go, you have a car, a liability. Beautiful, isn't it? We don't invest in financial advisors, ever, as Ugandans, yeah? And the last thing we found is that at retirement, only 5% of our members get a semblance of financial independence. What does this mean? It means that if you were earning 5 million shillings or living off 5 million shillings every month and you retire, you will not get better at retirement. However, your life or quality of life will slightly downgrade from that point, and that's just 5% of the population. What happens to the 95% of us? Trouble. There's a statistic that shows why many people die when they retire, and I tell you these are the things that happen. Because you know what? You've lost all your money, you don't have enough money, your lifestyle changes. So this is critical to us at the fund, that the narrative changes for all our members, but not only that, for our country. So I'll bring you down to what we know at the fund. So I said that at the fund we have about 1.32 million members. Of those 1.32 million members, only 48% of those are active. What does that mean? It means that every day for the last 1 year, only 629,000 people have been contributing a little bit consistently. And these people who contribute basically consistently for the last 1 year, 76% of them have a balance below 10 million shillings. And I'll go on in the next slides to show you how small 10 million shillings is in this country. What else did we find from the fund? We found that, of course, most of our members are dormant. Dormant means you haven't sent in a contribution for the last 1 year. We also know that every month in this Kampala, we pay out about 48 billion shillings. So I'll tell you how big 48 billion shillings. If you give me 48 billion shillings today as Jean Mutabazi Kasiri, I tell you I would never look back. But let's say I get a chunk of it, because we pay 48 billion shillings to an approximate 2,200 members per month. So when we pay this money, I always ask, where does it go? Because every time I go to visit people at their houses, the road that leads to their home is terrible. Every time I listen to people and their dreams, we don't see the picture of success right after we've paid out 48 billion shillings per month at NSSF. So my guess, and I'd like someone to come up with a better statistic, is when we get this money, we take it to capital shoppers and do shopping. How did I know we take it to capital shoppers? We take it to capital shoppers because there's always a queue at the shopping till. Every Ugandan is hankering to pay for their blue band, bread. I don't know what it is. It's like there's a hurry to spend. So I'm saying that we use our money to spend on operational expenses and we are not investing it. Because if we invested our money in this country, you'd see it. Better still, people will come and say we pay tuition for our children. And I'd say, oh, what an investment in your retirement. How would you invest in your children, knowing that things are changing now? Our children are not obliged to take care of us. So we also found that on average, people save with us the active membership for 6 years, the dormant membership for about 7.5 years. What worries me is that if the dormant people have an average saving span of 7.5 years, it means you're out of a job and your money has only stayed with us for 7 years, meaning that the balance is still too little to be significant enough to make a difference in your life. And then the scariest thing that we know is that only 11% of our members own 80% of the balances at the fund. So when people are saying, I have a lot of money at NSSF, the question is, are you in the 11% that own 80% of the 13.6 trillion shillings? So how are we divided at the fund? Every time I find that there are fewer women saving with us. And we all know that, I mean, many books and research has been done on this. Every time women save, economies grow. Women make better savings. Why? Because their risk appetite is a little bit lower than men. But also we know that women grow economies because they'll be the ones that take care of the children, while the men go ahead and take a lot of risks. So NSSF has a bigger demographic of savers being male, meaning we need to encourage more women into the saving space because we know that when women save, this country will change. We also know that at NSSF, only 4% of our members have more than 50 million Uganda shillings, and that's not a very good number. Because when we did research, this is what we found. So we did ask our beneficiaries, when you get your money, what do you spend it on? And 43% of our beneficiaries said that they use it to build or improve their homes. However, the cost of improving your home is 144 million shillings on average, and yet only 4% of our members have more than 50 million shillings. So if you are going to use your retirement money to build a home that is not going to return or give you a return on investment, that really worries us. Because you know what? At retirement, your money should be put in spaces where it will either grow or give you a comfortable life for the rest of your lifespan. We found that people are actually risking their retirement money by starting a business. And we said we need to put people in two classes. You don't get your last saving, the last lump sum that you have, and leverage it or bet on it and take it into a business that you've never tried. So what happens is that corporates, especially my viewers here who are sitting in this room, they all have these brilliant ideas. Oh, I think I need to start a hotel in my village in Masindi. Oh, no, I can start this business of importing cars. But because they have an 8 to 5 that takes out most of their brain power, they haven't started on it until the day they clock out of employment and get this chunk and throw it out there into an investment. And many times we know that research shows 2 years later, the business has gone belly up. So members, what are we trying to say with all the numbers that we've shared today? We're trying to say that NSSF is going to intervene at different levels. We want to intervene in your life before you start saving with the fund. We want to intervene in your life when you're saving with the fund, and we want to intervene in your life when you leave the fund. How do we do that? Come to class. It's free of charge. We will not ask for anything. We will just teach you how to manage your finances better so that your family and your loved ones and the country as a whole has a better livelihood. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. As we're going to have a highlight video of what goes on, but just to bring out a few comments. Biarugaba, you are stylish. Care of stocks agenda. Can the upcountry audience participate? Yes, we have programs, and most of these programs are now going to go online. Yes, you can participate. At the end of this, we shall be sharing with you a link to register, and then for the next cohort. Will our data be refunded? I will leave that to the next speakers. Password. People asking for the password. You don't need a password. Just log in. Just go to our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and Twitter. It's called Twitter, yes, and Twitter page. You don't need a password. Mark Muhairi is asking for investment strategy. When you come to these classes, we shall handle you as an individual. Kindly enroll to the class. Can you please consider young savers in terms of financial advice? Yes. This program, as you will see, goes, we are considering people right from 6 years to 16 years. That's what we call the young savers. Anyone after 16 years can be our member. How can I be a member and not have money? When you take your money, you still remain our member because we know at one time you will come back. Allow me to take you through the program highlights and the team, if the team is ready. What exactly goes, what do we do? This is just the highlight, it's not everything. Kindly, one thing you need to know about the financial literacy program, it is personal. When you come in here, some people will be failures, others will be victors, but whatever you take out has to be personal. You just pick up a lesson for yourself, something that works for you. What works for me may not work for you. Allow me to take you to the program highlights on video. Shadrach. Financial literacy is the awareness of you and your money. For NSSF, we further bring it down to personal financial literacy. It's having a money conversation between yourself and your money, your earnings, your expenses. They get this NSSF money, they spend it within 2 years of their lives. This is not because the money has come to them when they are old. It is because they get this money and start things at 55. The financial literacy program is to provide options to members while they are still in employment without compromising your employment.
Financial literacy was important to me at that time. I went there with an intention to learn how to use what I had. In the program, what I have really learned was to use the resources available to me. Good enough when you don't have a lot of money, you plan much more.
From the tour that we went at Dr. Nalima's farm, I came to realize that really I don't need to have a big piece of land to start something. It was because of financial literacy programs that I got to learn out of it and then teach myself more, practice, and now I know.
It's not how much you make, it's how you manage what you have. You grow it and life will be better for you financially.
And the beauty about it, it was not based on academic experience or work experience. I was in the 20, 30.
You get to speak to people in the perspective of which they understand money.
It was impressive because it was the shocking truth, and that's what, like, whatever they were saying was the truth, because people get money and they don't think about what's there for tomorrow.
My baseline for that class was believing in myself, that I can start up something.
Nayiga okwekkiririzaamu okubanga nange nsobola okukola ebintu bino ebyokulima era olusuku lwange olwo lwagala nnyo kuba olwentunulira lunzijukiza NSSF literacy class.
From the financial literacy program, I was able to start up my own business and my own CEO of Renovate pastries.
I set up an online business. It was a joke. I was like, let me just try it out. But anyway, it's working out, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm going back to school, but I'm like, oh God, why?
I have started more projects with the reduced salary than I did when I had the salary. So I have been able to sharpen my skills, and I'm able to weigh various options before I spend any money. I am more reasonable, I'm more realistic at this time.
I learned a lot of things. I learned how to handle money. I learned how to limit your spending. I learned that there is no money that's enough money.
One of the things that the financial literacy did for us and for Isaac mainly was to understand that it's important to keep records. So that was a very good takeaway for him, to learn that while you're investing in, you also need to keep the records such that you have a complete story to tell. Where did you come from? Where are you now?
That we require savings. Savings is mandatory for everyone aspiring to get into business. You don't just wake up one day and say you want to do business.
Expect to build networks. Expect to get exposure. I take these at the same point because as a person you will get to meet who is doing the same thing you are doing but doing it differently. Who's earning the same salary you are earning but is better than you or is worse than you, and you will get inspired. You will get exposure to all these stories. You will get exposure to first-time success stories, first-time failure stories. You will build up a network of who you can contact for what.
I would really recommend lots of youth to join the financial literacy program because they'll get mentored, they'll help themselves get the discipline, get to realize there is a future that they need to look at. And with girls, really, they need to know it's not more of being given, but there is that you need to use the strength and that we have to get where we need to be.
If it changed my life, it can change theirs. Because when I attended it, I feel like I matured financially.
Better your financial habits and magic will just happen.
Baleta abantu bangi abadde successful business gye bakoze bafuneyo kye bakola kye ba implementinga kuba ekirungi ekiri ku eno kirasi egenda kuyamba okwezuula oconcentrating ku business yemu oba bbiri ozikole ozimaximizing nawe osobola ozifunamu ozenyumirizeemu oyambe n'eggwanga lyo.
We render this to you, we give you this platform because you are our member. And finally, we want to reverse a statistic. The statistic that people get their money and they lose it within 2 years, that we envision it stopping. And that is why we have set up the financial literacy program. This financial literacy program is around and it's near you. You can get it from NSSF at no extra charge because you've already paid for it. Thank you, and indeed you have paid for it. Some people ask me, how much do we need to pay? And sometimes I'm tempted to ask for a figure. But one thing you need to understand is the money we are using is your money. Whether you participate in this program or not, you are paying for it. So please participate. We are also going to start up a ladies cohort. A cry from Jean here. We are starting up a ladies cohort so that we see more women savers. I think we need quality. If we have more women savers, we shall have quality members. Just to see that the numbers come up. Allow me to invite that Deputy Managing Director, who will in turn invite the Managing Director to address us.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I hope you're doing very well. I'm just going to invite we call him the SGL. If you know what the SGL means, my friend, it means Supreme Great Leader. But I'm going to tell you a story as I invite him. Somebody told me my story this morning. In fact, it was Jamada. As you know, Jamada is kind of the guy who makes sure I get to places safely. He says there was this man, he had two sons. Both of them had graduated and got jobs, but went back to live with him at home. 1 year passes, 2 years passes, they're not living home. He becomes very concerned. He said, I need to do something special for my sons. I'm getting old, and I'm not sure how they're going to get out of here. So he calls his two boys, he plans, he says, sons, I'm getting old. One of these days, I may not be here. But I've left for you guys a gift. When I die, demolish this house. Underneath the floor, you're going to find a tin box. And in that box will be treasures for you. And for the next 2 years, the boys can't wait for this man to die. You can imagine, first month, the guy's alive, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months. Finally, the old man leaves the earth. And as soon as they bury him, they demolish the house. To the ground, everything gone. Sure enough, there is a box there. So they went and opened it. And they're all excited. And there is a note in that box. And the note said, I built my own house. You've demolished it. Now you build your own. Now you don't want to have that shock when you grow old. And the person take us through that is none other than Mr. Richard Byarugaba, Managing Director, NSSF. Thank you.
What an introduction, Patrick. I hope that there was also a code on how to get rich or our financial literacy class in there. So do I do the presentation first? Or speech first? Okay. So I do have a speech. Which, as you know, I'm sure you will all be thinking about COVID. And COVID sure has been a wake-up call for every one of us. But it does raise a very important question in the history of mankind. And the question I'd like to pose today is, do we actually work to live, or do we live to work? If we live to work, then what happens when we are no longer able to work? But if we live to work, then when we lose our jobs, is life over? A little reader for you to think about. But of course, the reality is much more nuanced than this. Most of us strive for work that offers us both purpose and dignity. What is purpose? Purpose is about contributing value to the causes of humanity. And I believe that dignity is about enjoying the basic amenities of life while still affording your family moments of happiness and a sense of achievement. This can be your children graduating from university, or simply a break off at the weekend going to enjoy at the beach. But as human beings, we have a natural drive to be both financially secure and happy. In most countries, the state and institutions have a critical role to play in this quest. But guess what? The ultimate responsibility lies with the individual. The state can say whatever they want, but as an individual, we have our own responsibility to make sure that we are up to scratch with our financial literacy. And that's why it's important for us at the fund to have the financial literacy program. And that's what it's all about. So let's discuss a little bit of the historical perspectives of public institutions such as our own National Social Security Fund. And when I refer to it the next time, I'm going to call it the fund. Before I do that, allow me to quote from a former American president. I know that there is the election currently going on, but in those days, there was one called Franklin Roosevelt, who signed the American Social Security Act in the year 1934. He said, "We as a nation can never ensure 100% of the population against 100% of life's hazards. But we have tried to frame this law to give some measure of protection to an average citizen, to his family, so that they are protected against the loss of job or against poverty-ridden old age." If you look at the NSSF law, it focuses on offering protection against poverty-ridden old age. The NSSF model is simple. The employer and the employee enter into a partnership where each contributes into the provident fund. We at the fund invest this money prudently and subject to specific criteria which are prescribed within that law. We pay out a lump sum to our qualifying members of their contributions and the accumulated investments for this particular person who has contributed. So if you permit me to refer back to my quote of President Roosevelt, the role of the NSSF is to offer some measure of protection. It's an important statement which I urge all of you to pay attention to. Your contribution to the fund, if you are formally employed, is 5% of your salary. Your employer, by law, is then required to contribute up to 10% of your salary into your account. And once the money is with us at the fund, we make an obligation to make sure that we collect it, first of all, that we invest it so that it earns a decent return, so that we can overcome the eroded value of inflation over time. Simple, but obviously difficult when it comes to execution. As you will have known by now, this year we declared an interest rate return of 10.75% against a 10-year moving average inflation benchmark, which we utilize, of 6.2%. In the last 5 years, on average, we have beaten inflation by 5.11%. If I must say so myself, this is a sterling record that we've committed to uphold. The question, however, for us continues to be, is our member happy in spite of the fact that we continue to give them a great return? We have set ourselves 3 major assumptions, values that we've promised our member, things that we think will make him or her happy. The first is that we will keep your money safe and preserve its value, and you will be happy with the service we provide. So that's the first. The second is that if we serve you at your convenience, think about our e-channels. Rather than you having to come to our branches, you will be happy and pleased. Number 3, our third value is, if we partner with you, we will develop innovative solutions to ensure that your financial security across your lifespan is thrilled. So, let me repeat just the 3 things that we've set ourselves as targets, as assumptions, things we think that if we provide to you, our member, you'll be happy. 1, keep your money safe, give it to you when it has multiplied. 2, give you convenience so that when you come to do business with us, either in branch or at your convenience, it will be painless and smooth. And 3, we'll give you products that are great, that will look after you from cradle to grave. So, for much of the past 10 years, I am sure you'll agree with me that we seemed to have given you 1 and 2. Your money has grown. We've given you convenience to do business. But we all know that when COVID showed up, we were still a very long way to go in addressing value number 3. The press was awash, social media was awash, and generally, everybody wanted a midterm access. That confirms to us that financial insecurity is still a major challenge in Uganda, and for us represents the repercussions that impact the physical and mental health of our members. So we know there is a problem. So what is the solution? The solution is premised on the customer journey of our member. And today, we are getting involved in this customer journey in a very passive and indirect way through your employer. That's the reality. But we also realize that more and more this approach is simply not enough. Your employer contributing for you without you making an effort to get involved is not a sustainable strategy. We need you to get more involved in your own financial propositions. You need to be an active member. This explains why we introduced the financial literacy program and also why we are advocating for a change in the funds governing legislation that currently is taking place in the Parliament of Uganda. I will run through a brief presentation about the objectives of the financial literacy program. But before I do this, allow me to warmly congratulate the second and third cohorts of this program who are graduating today. Congratulations. We look to you to be our ambassadors and change agents once you have graduated. You won't believe this, but when we began this program, it was a simple experiment with the first cohort. Having graduated 2 more cohorts, we now know that there is a lot of value in the thing we've been doing. And our intention is to turn this program into a mass movement, a radical shift in the financial culture of Ugandans. If each of you is able to transform the financial journey of just 2 people, each of these 2 people will convert another 2, and hopefully, if you recall what Jean said, Uganda will be on its way to a truly transformed society. This is a challenge I lay before each of you listening in today. So let me congratulate you once again and wish you all a better life. And now, I'll make my presentation. Will I die poor? I love numbers. If you look at that presentation, this is the life expectancy of data in the world since 1950. 25 years have been added to our life expectancy. I'm sure you can see that in the 1950s, that was below 50 years. Today, our life expectancy, on average, is around 75 years. More for ladies than male. But if you look at both sexes, that has been an upward trajectory. In your own Uganda, the life expectancy is 63 years. However, you all know that in order to claim your NSSF, the official retirement age is 55 years. So, I always tell people, you're going to live a lot longer than the time you require to get your NSSF, which is a big deal, because as you probably notice, when we get our employment, we normally start off at the age of 25. So if you are still alive at the age of 65, in most probability, you will still be around until age 80. What does this mean? It means that if you retire at the age of 55, which is the official retirement age in Uganda, you will have worked for 31 years, but wait for it, you will still have another 25 years to live. So literally, you have a lot more time to live than a lot more time to have saved for this money. So you had better have a very good plan. So what will the quality of your retirement life be? As we've seen, such a long period. This is a happiness graph taken from Lifehack, data that all of us have seen. And this data shows that the two happiness points occur at the very end of our life spectrum. At the very young age, in our 20s, we are absolutely happy, no responsibility, just gotten out of college. Life is all in front of us. And when we've retired, definitely you can see where the problems are. Show that there is a midlife crisis, and that midlife crisis normally occurs in the middle of our lives. It's characterized by school fees. It's characterized by rent, if you are renting. It's characterized by the failed businesses that you might have attempted. It's characterized by the high interest loans that you might have taken. And finally, it's characterized by either or marital problems. That creates all the problems for us, and somehow seems, thinking about it, to have been the reason why a lot of us were asking for the midterm access, because we wanted to sort out those problems. But how can we embrace our happiness again? What is your approach? Having found out that at the age of 55, that seems to be your worst moment in terms of happiness. We can't take our happiness for granted, because as you've seen, at the age of 20, there's nothing much to take care of, and therefore we are happy. But certainly once you've taken on the responsibilities, you need to prepare for that moment when your happiness will come back, and that's the plan for your retirement. So you need to plan for that happiness. Don't leave this to chance. Majority of Ugandans retire with inadequate savings to meet their expenses. A majority exhaust their savings within 2 years. I think that has been repeated over and over again. And just for you to understand, our average payout is just only 18 million shillings. Not enough even to let you own your house. So we know that there's a problem and we need to solve it. NSSF is not the answer. Today, a typical customer journey at the fund looks like this. You get your first job, you register. Over the journey, we are able to give you online statements. We are able to give you information. If you had a work accident, we might be able to give you an invalidity benefit. If you are an expatriate or are exiting Uganda, we might be able to pay you an immigration grant. Unfortunately, if you die, you might be able to claim your survivors, or the people that you leave behind will claim your survivors benefit. And if you lose your job and you get to the age of 50, you might be able to get your withdrawal benefit. In the meantime, if you do lose your job, there is also an opportunity for you to make a voluntary contribution, so that when you are reaching the age of 50, you've accumulated some money. And some people, when do they get jobs with government, they're able to get into the exempted employment stage and therefore withdraw their money from the fund. But the majority of us will wait for the age 55. And I think that numbers show that in excess of 40% wait and retire at the age of 55 to pay out their money. So today, this is the typical journey our members go through. The question therefore remains unanswered. Will I have enough savings when I retire? Am I comfortable meeting my daily expenses? Will I comfortably service my debts? And if I lose my job tomorrow, what will I be doing? How will I become financially secure today and in the future? I pose these questions because I started off by telling you that NSSF is not the answer. Because you need to do a little bit more. So, the financial literacy program hopes to change that journey. And this is what the financial literacy program will do. So you've seen the slide before talking about the things you can do in the meantime while you're saving with NSSF. But there are some new things I've introduced on this slide. You notice that voluntary savings and investment has now become a significant part of your life. Number two, I've also included in some new initiatives or interventions like advice that you need to take on savings, debt management, investment planning, business management, and retirement planning. And those should come in at the very time you get your first job. Don't wait until you are getting into retirement. In the new journey, we address two major gaps. First is enabling you with information, advice, and partners to help you get good financial advice so that you can make good financial decisions throughout your financial journey. The second intervention is turning the above advice into action so that it's reflected in the way you make voluntary savings and investments that will eventually give you the financial independence. So that you do not only rely on what you will get out of NSSF, either through an invalidity benefit, an immigration grant, a survivor's benefit, a withdrawal benefit, an exempted benefit, or even an age benefit. That's what financial literacy program is all about, because it will give you that. So let's close this with a few important tips for takeaways. 1, develop and stick to a budget. 2, document your expenses as a form of control. I always tell people, it doesn't matter how much income you have. So long as you do not control your expenses, you will never be able to save. So every single time you think about savings, don't think about your income. Think about your expenses. Because guess what? Your expenses erode on your ability to be able to save. So if you control your expenses, you'll find you'll have more disposable income which you can put into investment. 3, as you approach retirement, that's the time to pay off your debt, but save more frequently and more aggressively. And finally, you must find a reliable alternative or source of income that is passive. And passive investment is the one where you do not have to manage it. So examples of that are too many. A bond, a treasury bill, an investment in a company where you don't have to manage it, shares in a company, investments in an investment club, in a circle that is doing business and giving you a return. something that you don't have to actively get involved in, is a very, very good alternate investment source of income. And finally, only start a business that you're truly passionate about. Get the right advice and do the planning. Don't forget that there will always be things that will disrupt you. Example, COVID did disrupt us. But there will be other things that will disrupt your financial journey. Therefore, you need to have resilience and embed that in your everyday life. So, your job could become redundant. What can you do about that? Continuously invest in learning new skills that are valuable so that once you're made redundant, you're able to get use your new skill to get a new opportunity. Number 2, you could be retrenched. Again, invest in professional networks so that your next job can come from there. Number 3, big deal for me, health. Health is so important. Invest in it. Make sure that your health is number 1 priority. What you eat, what you drink, what you exercise, what you don't do, what you do is so important for your health. We don't care about it, but it's such an important investment. When everything else fails, start a small business, but use your savings. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And ladies are normally good at running small businesses. Involve your wife. Unfortunately, that seems one-sided. And for women, involve your husband, but make sure he doesn't wreck it. Thank you. So I hope that was useful. I hope there are a few takeaways in there that you've been able to do. Now, it's my honor. Can I continue? It's my honor and privilege to announce the graduation of the 678 participants of the Financial Literacy Program under cohort 2 and 3, split as follows. So, the first cohort was the 20 to 30 year age cohort, and we had 85 participants. The second group was the age 30 to 40 age cohort, and there were 92 participants. The third group was the 40 to the 50 age cohort, 47 participants. And the other group was the above 50, such as myself, group, which had only 21 participants. We also had a church, the CPM church cohort, which had 29 participants. We had the Mukazi entrepreneur, which had 14 participants. We even had a workplace group from Toyota Uganda, 54 participants. We had the weekend class, which was 60 participants. We had some regional classes. We had the Hoima regional class, which had 17 participants. We had the Fort Portal class, which had 15 participants. And we had Soroti regional class, which had 19 participants. And guess what? We also had an online class. And that was the third cohort, which was online, which is the largest, which was 225 participants. So congratulations to all of you for graduating today and hopefully teaching somebody and teaching somebody else and teaching somebody else so that we can make this a revolution a movement, smaller movement from the other movement. So, I would now like to introduce the objective of the new customer journey we are offering is to give you continuous advice that empowers you to make good financial decisions today, tomorrow, and right into your twilight years. Ultimately, it is to make your lives better. It is in this same spirit. Today, I have the pleasure and honor to invite someone who needs absolutely no introduction, but I'll still go ahead and do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Because his advice is worth millions of dollars if you follow it. Our guest speaker today is a venture capitalist. He is a best-selling author. He is a renowned entrepreneur. And he can speak as well. He's a best-selling speaker. He was named one of the top 12 speakers in the world by Meetingsnet for his inspirational and transformational impact on businesses. Yeah, there he is. He's a go-to guy for many CEOs and executives navigating the disruptions in the world and change, which is a big deal in today's world. He has worked in 37 countries across 6 continents, helping leaders of business to make necessary but painful shifts in their businesses. He is a regular contributor to all the international news channels, CNBC, Forbes, BBC, CNN, Bloomberg. Our guest speaker has empowered global audiences because he has walked the path from sitting on several large company boards to founding successful businesses, from leading teams and being accountable to shareholders. He has shared his failures. I didn't know that. Did you have any? And successes with candor and humility, and instantly building trust with his global audiences. And he is, most importantly, respected by all his peers. His mission is to have a meaningful and a lasting impact on the businesses he consults to. He keeps businesses and audiences enthusiastic and enthralled through a combination of hard-hitting facts, humor, and charisma. Everybody listening in, everybody tuned in, ladies and gentlemen, I invite and would like to introduce to you Vusi Thembekwayo. I hope I got it right.
Yeah, it was a decent effort. It was a decent effort.
Fantastic. Over to you. Really looking
Jumbo,
forward
thank
to
you so
listening
much.
and watching.
Jumbo, thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to everybody that I'm chatting to on the WhatsApp groups. I see you on the chats. To everybody else that I was chatting to just now on social media, I see you guys as well. So it would be great, I think, if we could share some of what comes out of our conversation today across the platform. So if you're on a social media, please feel free to take a picture of some of the stuff I'm going to be sharing, and let's engage. Let's have a conversation. So where to start? I think let's do this. Let me go directly into my Prezo. So they're going to enable me to share screen, which they have done so now. And then I'm going to do as such. All right. So First thing I want to say to you is this. A lot of the work that I do is based in numbers. I love numbers. I love sciences, but I really enjoy the arithmetic. I think that numbers have a way of sobering the mind. And so often where we follow emotion, we follow gut, we follow bias, we follow instinct, numbers generally have a way of removing and stripping those things out of the decision-making process. So the way I do all of my work is I try to predicate the conversation first in the hard sciences, the numbers, and then we get into the other stuff, the softer stuff around character, emotion, behavior, national cultures, right? That stuff is important, but if you don't base yourself in the numbers, you lose a sense of context and perspective. Second thing is all the work that I do in my speaking work is actually published through our research company called IC Knowledge Bureau. And we work with several large organizations actually all across the continent, two in Uganda actually. One is a bank, the other one is an insurance company. And a lot of the work that we do is just about helping organizations, executives, and leaders make better decisions. And I just want to take a step back here. So the thing about leadership is, and I often say to people, the difference between being a manager and a leader is managers generally don't have the same what we call degree of operating leverage in terms of the decisions that they make. So when you're a leader, the reason you are a leader is because you have very little time to make very high stake decisions, often with very little data. I'll say that again. Very little time to make high stake decisions with little data. And so the reason people talk about the pressure of being a leader, the pressure at the top, is precisely because you are operating in an environment where you don't have a lot of time, you have a lot of stakeholders, and you have to make some really tough decisions. I make that point to simply say this. Leadership is tough. It's not easy. But the only thing harder than leading other people is leading yourself. And so it's actually the best place for us to start is, so how do you lead yourself? So what I want to do is first get into some macros. Let's look at some big numbers. This is work done by a fellow called Angus Maddison. I've shared it on several other platforms before, but I thought it would be a great place for us to start with it here today. And Angus Maddison did this body of work called the Jesus Project. And what he did was he looked at, referenced, and studied the world's economy since the death of Jesus. It's 2,000 years of economic history. It's phenomenal, the study, really. Especially if you're like an economist, right? And I saw the presentation that you were sharing earlier. So the point about it is I want you to pay attention to that dark blue line. That dark blue line is economic output. Today we call it GDP. And that's global GDP. Global GDP since the death of Jesus. I mean, that's, if you notice between the 1st and the 18th century, there's a growth in global GDP, but that growth is linear. And then you have this massive exponential rise 19th and 20th century. And so the question for us is why? The answer is, in part, the world got more connected. So 150 years ago, if you made products and goods in one part of the world, people couldn't buy it in another part of the world. But through the design of the mercantilistic system of trade, ships, ports, transacting infrastructure, banking infrastructure, insurance infrastructure, today, a product made in Asia is sold in Africa literally within a 48-hour cycle. Yesterday, I was talking to a young man who does something called drop shipping, because I was trying to understand what's this new economy called drop shipping. He owns no factory, he owns no production capacity, he's an influencer on social media, and he has a product that he endorses. He then buys on bulk the product from a manufacturer, typically in China, say, and sells it into his influencer market. Now, of course, there's some risks embedded in that system. But the idea that he's sitting in one part of the continent, right? He's in Benin. He's sitting in one part of the continent. He buys from a completely different continent, and then he sells to consumers all over the African continent. I thought that was very interesting. So the world today is more connected is the point. And because it's more connected, the world today is much, much wealthier than it's ever been. Much wealthier. You actually can't compare. The second is that lighter blue graph. That shows global life expectancy. That's adjusted for infant mortality, right? Which is why the numbers would be slightly different to the numbers that were showed earlier. This adjusts for infant mortality. It's an interesting body of work, but what they show here is the number of years that human beings live if you adjust for the incidence of infant mortality. And for those of you who are unaware, until the 18th century, men going to war had a higher life expectancy than women giving birth. Just think about that. But that's like the wonders of modern medicine, right? I mean, today we almost don't think about it, but giving birth is a natural part of the cycle. 200 years ago, giving birth was a huge life event. There were massive risks attached to the incident of giving birth. So the world today is wealthier than it has ever been. Human beings today are healthier than they have ever been. There has never been a better time to be this little species called a Homo sapien on this little rock on our solar system called Earth, not according to this data. So if this is true, and I argue here that it is, then help me understand why the world today is also more unequal than it's been in a very, very long time. And this is in part the question I want us to have a conversation about. What creates inequality? Is it income or is it assets? First, the real question for us to ask ourselves is, how do we measure class? What quantifies as lower class, middle class, and the upper classes? Is it income or assets? One of the interesting things about income is that income is not generally an indicator of wealth creation. It's a fantastic input for wealth creation, but it's not an indicator of wealth creation. So for instance, some of the least wealthy people are people with generally high levels of incomes. Because with high levels of incomes, they also have high levels of disposable income and then get into a cycle of spending money. Whereas what we see is often people with lower incomes tend to be more prudent and judicious in how they plan their finances. That's not a universal case, but it's like a highlighter, right? So the world today generally is just more unequal, right? And the conversation I want us to have over the next little while is, why is the world today more unequal? Note that question, put a big question mark on it, because we're going to come back to it in a moment. Now, the second question I want us to have. This is a very, very busy graph. So I'll break it down for you. We're going to look at its component parts. First, look at the infographic with the countries in the continent connected by dot. The dark blue is the percent of people in those countries that do not have access to reliable energy and or power. In other words, that's the percentage of the population in that country that does not have access to electricity. So if you look at Nigeria, the largest economy in the continent, 55% of Nigerians don't have access to reliable energy. Mali, it's 67%. Just next to Mali is one of my favorite countries. It's also one of the poorest countries in the continent. Niger, 83%. Then I want you to pay attention to Chad and the Central African Republic. Both of those in the 90s. Chad at 94, Central African Republic at 95%. Pay attention to the Western regions now. So go to Sierra Leone, look at Liberia, 94% and 98% respectively. Go to the center of the continent, look at Rwanda, 85%. And that's even with the miracle that Rwanda is lauded for being today. But what should really jump out at you, if you're paying attention, is what happens in North Africa. So look at the North Africans. Morocco, where we have an office, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and a country where we've just made our latest investment now, Egypt. And what do you notice? Huge amounts of access to reliable power and energy. It's a contentious political point that's often made, but when global enterprises venture into the continent of Africa, they typically tend to split their operations into something called MENA and SSA. MENA means Middle East and North Africa. So what they do is they bundle as an economic territory, Middle East and North Africa. And this is in big part why. The cultures are far more similar, but also the macroeconomics are very, very similar. And then they look at SSA, which is where we are, Sub-Saharan Africa. So the point I'm making is that when we have a conversation about what does Africa look like, we actually need to have two conversations. There's a North Africa, and then there's Sub-Saharan Africa, the rest of us. And the fundamentals are very, very different. Just pay attention a little bit now to the East. So if you look at Ethiopia, look at Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, and again, you notice the numbers. Look at Malawi, 92%. And so the question you ask yourself is this, for me, as somebody who thinks about the long-term growth of the continent, massive underlying economic potential, as well as just the verbal and economic growth opportunity, right? So 622 million out of 1.2 billion people in the continent. Say that again, 622.6 million people out of the 1.2 billion people in the continent do not have access to reliable power and electricity. This is important for three reasons. One, reliable power and electricity allows economies and countries to industrialize very quickly and modernize very quickly. It allows them to develop modern education systems, modern healthcare systems, modern transportation systems, modern banking systems. Access to reliable power is like blood in your body. Without it, nothing else in the macros makes sense. So actually the most important place often for us to focus in terms of building economies that make sense, power, 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 power. And then the second reason it's important is because if you assume, as we say in law, pari passu, so compare on a like-for-like basis these numbers to North Africa, and imagine what the continent of Africa looks like with each of the countries that I've mentioned earlier at a single digit of people who do not have access to power. So reduce Nigeria from 55% to 5%. What's the size of Nigerian economy then? So for me, the reason I invest in the continent, the reason I believe in the continent, the reason I spend my time raising capital for investments into the continent is captured in this single graph. The economic upside that's tethered to the inefficiencies in our system is just unbelievable. We also tend to get in our own way as Africans. You know, we do things that we shouldn't do, but set that aside, it's unbelievable. I'm still making the case, right? So remember, I base all my stuff in numbers. I'm still making the case. Give me comments, by the way, on the chats as we're having this conversation. I'd love to hear from you in terms of what you think. Ask questions as well so that we can get into a conversation. So what I've done to date, I've shown you that the world, wealthier than it's ever been, human beings, healthier than they've ever been. I brought you home to this continent of Africa and I showed you access to power and electricity, right? That's what I've done. So here's what I want to do now. What I want to do now is I want to choose 4 different countries in the continent, and I want to show you the population of those countries, the middle class in those countries, as well as the number of the percentage of population in those countries with access to reliable power and energy. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you GDP per capita, which is a wealth measure of how wealthy the average citizen is in that country. GDP per capita, if you want to understand it, is nothing more than taking the global sum of GDP, dividing it by the population of people, right? So the number of people living in a country. And the idea, if you believe in kind of trickle-down economics, is that if GDP rises and population stays the same, we get wealthier, right? And so the challenge with many countries on the continent, for instance, is that often we've come into this era now where our GDP growth rates are lower than our population growth rate. So GDP growth is lower than population CAGR. And the reason that's important is because it means we're all getting progressively poorer. So let's look at these 4 different countries, right? And did a lot of great work here to try and animate this. So check this out. First, Egypt. Remember that country I told you about? There's 96 million people in Egypt. They have 31.6% is the size of their middle classes, with 99% of the population having access to electricity, and a GDP per capita, pay attention to this number, of $3,500. So take the GDP of the continent, of the country, divided by the population, and it's 3,500 USD. Now, if you compared Egypt to a like country in Europe, you'd be comparing it to a country as small as Armenia. Armenia is, if you're wondering, where Kim Kardashian's family comes from, all right? So they're Armenian. But Armenia has a population of 2.9 million people, and yet it has a higher GDP per capita than Egypt. So think about what that means in terms of potential economic upside. Egypt, 31% middle class. What would happen if Egypt added an additional 15% of its population into the middle class? Had a 50% middle class system. What does that GDP per capita number looks like? I mean, the numbers are very exciting, very sexy investment thesis. Let me bring you to my home country, South Africa. These numbers depress me sometimes when I see them. So South Africa is at 55 million citizens, 56 million, give or take. We have a middle class of 19.8%. That number, by the way, is declining, which is a big worry. With 90% of the population having access to electricity, our GDP per capita is at 5,200, right? So who would you compare South Africa to? You'd compare South Africa to a country like Serbia, yeah, which has 7 million citizens and a like GDP per capita. So reverse the logic. Take South Africa, 20% middle class, add an additional 50% to that middle class. Just make it 30% middle class. What does that GDP per capita number look like? Very exciting, very sexy investment thesis. I'll share with you why this is important in a minute. Third, another country. Horse number 3, Morocco, 24 million, 27%. Who would you compare Morocco to? You'd compare Morocco to a Ukraine, 45 million, similar GDP per capita. And then finally, Ethiopia. I mean, the numbers for Ethiopia, every time I see them, I just, my skin just frizzles. 90 million people living in Ethiopia, but only 8% of them are in the middle class, with 56% having access to electricity and a GDP per capita as low as only $700. So what would happen, and who could you compare Ethiopia to? Well, you compare it to a country like Nepal, which has 29 million citizens and has a similar GDP per capita. So the point is, imagine what would happen if Ethiopia at that middle class level doubled its middle class, just doubled the middle class. And that brings us to the conversation I want us to have. So the conversation I want us to have is, so how do countries double up the middle class? That's really the conversation I want us to have a conversation about. And if you're not in the middle class, how do you get into that? Why is middle class important? Well, the bedrock of developing any economy is a middle class. So the reason why China is the power that it is today is because it's grown its middle class. It's the largest automotive market in the world today, right? Just grown by its middle class. If you look at what we call the American century, right, which is the 20th century, that entire 20th century is nothing more than America building its middle class based on two ideas: a chicken on every stove and a car in every garage. In fact, I can't remember the American president, but I do recall a speech where one of the American presidents said, I commit 3 things to the average American citizen. He said, I commit a home that you can own, a chicken on your stove every single night, a car in every garage. And why are those things important? Well, those things are important because they talk a bit about what does it look like if you really want to build an economy that's inclusive, an economy that grows, but also a continent that actually makes sense, right? So we often have a conversation about creating a savings culture and an investment culture that's disconnected a little bit from national culture. And that's where I want to start. So if we can't have a national culture conversation, then a savings culture at an individual level misses the point. So when you live in an environment, there is something called a dominant culture. A dominant culture is the culture that dominates how people act, think, and prioritize, right? So a dominant culture is a culture that governs how people behave, how people think, and how they prioritize. You may not be aware of this, but everything you do and say is influenced. Everything you do and say. It's influenced by the literature that you read. It's influenced by the news that you watch. It's influenced by the conversations that you're in. And it's influenced by just the general level of exposure that you have. It's influenced, right? So one of the ways to untether yourself from making poor financial decisions is to just take a step back and understand what is the national culture. So how do you understand what is the national culture? 3 things. First thing you do is have a look at the conversations that that nation is having on social media and the conversation that that nation is having on traditional media. Just go into that as a vortex to understand what that nation is talking about. So if I think a bit about South Africa, South Africa's national culture is deeply, deeply political. Everybody's having a political conversation, right? If you want to have a conversation that will get people really riled up, say something political in South Africa. Everybody's in the conversation. But if you want to have a conversation about financial literacy, it doesn't draw the same attention because that's a big part of our national culture. The last time I was in Uganda, I was with Paul and his team at Capital One, as well as the amazing people at Knight Frank. And we of course had the great event, right? But the last time I was in Uganda, I met some amazing, amazing entrepreneurs. And so one of the things I noticed about the national culture is there's definitely this national culture of like the second hustle. Everybody has a job, and then everybody has the thing that they do additional to the job, right? So there's this culture of the second hustle. And I suppose that's in part because just the primary job is generally not enough to make ends meet. And so there's this culture of the second hustle, which is fantastic because it drives a massive culture of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism. The second was there's a culture of people wanting to learn more. So there's a deep culture of knowledge, deep culture of people wanting more information, wanting access to new sources of information, and not just believing what they're hearing, but actually interrogating that information. And the third, which for me was interesting, and I actually really enjoyed this, was as a culture of people who are not allowing themselves to have their personal fortunes tethered to the political fortunes of the country. So I almost got the sense, especially from young people, that they are trying the best they can to untether themselves, detach themselves from what the political fortunes of the country look like. Almost I'm going to do this for me, regardless of what the macros politically for the country look like. And so one of the things countries need to do is to find a way of creating national myths and ideologies that spur a culture of savings and investments, right? So if you can't find a way of creating national myths and ideologies that spur that culture, it becomes very, very difficult to do some of the things that I'm talking about. So I wonder if your mother ever told you to eat your carrots because your carrots were good for your eyes. There is, by the way, no scientific evidence linking carotene to eyesight. And so the question is, where does that come from? In World War II, during World War II, the Royal Air Force, which is the British Royal Air Force, it's actually called the Royal Air Force in the Navy, experimented with a type of technology called radar technology. And what they did was they looked to prove this little thing around radar technology. And so they gave radar technology to a single pilot, and they said to the specific pilot, fly only at night and shoot as many Nazi pilots as planes as you can. The thing is, this pilot was flying at night and he had a higher strike rate than some of the pilots flying during the day. So it was a skunkworks project, which means he wasn't allowed to tell the other pilots how it is he was flying at night and shooting down more people. This little myth developed. He ate a carrot a day because he loved carrots. And so this little myth developed that he could see at night because he had better eyes and better eyesight than most people, and he had better eyesight than most people purely because he was eating more carrots. That's where the myth of eat your carrots comes from. So what I want you to just think about is how many other myths do you believe that are not true? Just think about that. What are the stuff you believe that's not true? So let me think a little bit about what myths are very commonplace today. So one of the myths that are commonplace today is that entrepreneurs tend to be these young people that are starting businesses. There's actually an interesting study I read just the other day. It was done by Harvard Business Review. And they show that the average age of a technology entrepreneur in North America, and you can extrapolate this for the rest of the world, but the average age of a technology entrepreneur in North America is 42 years old. 42 years old. Could you imagine that? So what happens is people go kind of through their 20s acquiring a series of skills, their 30s professionalizing those skills, and in their 40s they go, I actually want to start a business and I want to see if I can create wealth for myself. What we see in the African continent is it's the inverse. Young people grow up, often unable to be absorbed into the labor market, are forced into an environment where they're starting businesses and starting their own enterprises, and then they start their own enterprises and learn skills as they go. So you have to wonder for yourself, how many other myths do we hold true which are just not true? A myth that I think I see a lot of people do when it comes to personal financial planning. Here is the myth. The myth is, when I make more money, I will save more money. You won't. You know what happens when you make more money? You spend more money. That's what happens. And why does that happen? Because you're a human being. Of course, that's what you're going to do. You make more money, you're going to spend it. You'll convince yourself that you need things that you don't need, and then you turn wants into needs. You absolutely convince yourself that the thing you want is the thing you need. And a great way to see this, I'm going to share, this is so exciting. Yesterday, I was with the good people at TransUnion. TransUnion is one of the leading credit bureaus in the world. And I was having a conversation with one of the people in their data analytics desk. And they shared something to me that's interesting. They now have data sets that enable them to extrapolate credit risk, listen to this, based on the model of your phone. I know. So think about that, right? And of course, it's data. And one of the things data is agnostic to emotional feeling. It's data. So it's like a mountain of data, and then they look at this data and they extrapolate the insights out of this data. And one of the insights that have come out of the data sets was that generally, the language here is important. Generally, not always, generally, people that are more prudent with their finances, that have higher credit scores, that have higher savings rates, and that have far better investment profiles, tend to have much older phones. They don't renew at every single phone cycle. I want you to think about that. What phone do you have, comrades? Right? Because if you think about it, it's like a little, it's a disposable income issue, right? Well, I have a little bit more money. iPhone 12 is launching. There's a massive, Tim Cook does the presentation. He goes and he presents and boom, and you see people lining up to get the latest iPhone, and then the latest Mac launches, you're getting the latest Mac. That's if you're in the iPhone ecosystem. You want to meet people who are more Nazis than iPhone people? Go and meet people who are in the Android ecosystem. Jeez, people in the Android ecosystem are absolutely religious about the technical prowess of the open source ecosystem, right? And so they constantly updating, and one of the things they've been able to extrapolate is the phone you have gives us a lot of data and insights about you and your behavior. But for a lot of us, the phone we have is a function of national culture. If you are in a nation and in a culture where you have to be in that nightclub, yeah, and I've partied in Kampala a couple of times, so I know all about the nightclubs there, where you have to be in the nightclub, pulling out the latest model of phone to look cool, then as a function of that, what it means is deterioratively, you're going to make financial decisions based on how you look, not actually what's happening behind the scenes. So the point here is to be very careful of a dominant culture in the country that you live in, and to be very careful of how those cultures extrapolate into your own life. The second is you have to find a way to be agile, right? And I think this thing about agility, I love the word agility. I hate how people use it, because I think agility, just like the word fragility, by the way, and if you want to learn a bit about the word fragility, read Nassim Taleb's work. he does a lot of mathematical extrapolation on this concept of fragility, right? But this idea about agility is interesting. So you have to find a way to make sure that you have a series of skills and competencies that are progressively agile. So one of the things we know about how people accumulate wealth is if you want to accumulate wealth, you need what we call deep subject matter expertise. You need to know something very, very well. And generally, the more subject matter knowledge you have in an area, you tend to be more technically proficient. You progress to the higher echelons of that discipline. And as you progress to the higher echelons of that discipline, you attract high remuneration. And then, therefore, on a like-for-like basis, you should become generally financially more independent. Until we started realizing that one of the things that also make people more technically proficient was the ability to think outside discipline. So I'm wondering in this conversation, how many of you in this conversation actively look to think outside of the discipline that you work in, outside of the area that you work in? How many of you are actually looking for new insights and new information outside of the specific sector that you're operating in? So for instance, if you have an agri-business, are you reading anything about what's happening in the creative arts? If you are in financial services, are you reading anything about what's happening in, I don't know, construction? If you're in the building sector, are you reading anything about what's happening in telecommunications and technology? Because the ability to be agile and to see the world outside of your own discipline is often what inspires people to look for new ideas about how to do things. So I'm right in the middle of a very exciting transaction, and I hope we get this transaction going. It's a great firm that is a financial services firm. They're a global firm, and I'm looking at acquiring equity in this firm. They do foreign exchange, Forex. So they do what we call the alternative asset classes. They're in Forex, they're in cryptocurrencies, and the like, right? And for those of you who know, I have personally run away from positioning myself in that space because there is a lot of scamming going on in the environment of cryptocurrencies and Forex, a lot of scamming going on. But if you get it right with a reputable partner, you can far better your financial fortunes. So I'm going to share with you a story, a personal story about how I got lucky using cryptos. And it's one of those stories that I think is important because sometimes when we talk about the idea of wealth creation, retirements, and savings, we talk about the systematic plan process. Very important. In fact, I'd say that's 90% of the job. Then there's a 10% that's just luck, honestly. So it was the year of our Lord, 2015. I was 29 years old at the time, and I was on this show called Dragon's Den. And so I'm on the show called Dragon's Den, and I do a couple of investments, and I met a fellow who's since become a friend of mine called Vinny. In fact, we call him Bitcoin Lingham. And he started telling me about Bitcoin. Now, I'd known about Bitcoin at a surface level, but I didn't know about Bitcoin. And so Vinny said to me, he said, you know what? Here's what you do, Vus. He says, buy some Bitcoin and just forget that you bought them. Put them away for your kids. And so I bought. I want to say when I bought, Bitcoin was probably trading at $400. What's Bitcoin at now? $13,000 the last time I checked. That's been in a space of 5 years, from $400 to $13,000. Do you know what I've done? Nothing. I didn't buy more Bitcoin, by the way, which I often shoot myself in the foot about. So I'm actively now looking to go, maybe I should just start buying some more Bitcoin. But I think at $13,000, it's a lot of money, right? But of course, attached to the Bitcoin system and to the crypto system is a whole host of other disciplines. The point I'm making here is this. You're going to look, if you want ways to create wealth, retirements, and savings, 90% of the process is about doing the regimented stuff, just the disciplined stuff. Save and don't spend everything you earn. As you make more money, save more money. Put that money away into reliable instruments that you know will give you a future better than your past, right? The minute you come into the money that you've saved, don't go for big ticket items. A big African thing, and I don't know why we do this. You get the money from your pension, and the first thing you want to do is renovate your home, okay? So you take 40% of your money from your pension, you retired. You're not going to make more money. You take 40% of your money from your pension and you put it into a fixed asset called a home, and you renovate your home. But it's a fixed asset called your home. It's your primary residence, which means you're the one living in it. You're not going to rent it out, which means that asset is not going to generate more income. So you've just taken 40% of a bulk sum of money you've come into and put it into a fixed asset that might grow in net asset value, but that will not generate free cash flows. And while it looks like you're making a smart decision, it's actually not. I remember having to counsel my mother with this. I was like, just don't do this. It's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to raise a loan prior to your retirement, use the loan money to better your home, and then make sure that as you earn your retirement money in retirement, a portion of that money goes towards servicing the debt that was for building the home. But then the income that you're generating from your pension is still a far higher income than the income alternatively if you had planted that into a fixed asset. So you need to look outside, is what I'm saying. You need to look to truly be agile outside of the areas of discipline that you generally get information from if you want to create wealth. Number 3 is to be careful of the demographic construct, right? So just be careful, guys, of falling into what I call the demographic lens of how we see things. And this demographic lens is really important because it's how a lot of us self-identify. So we go, I am this, and then we try to go, if I am this, who else like me and where are they? But what does that look like? I am a 20-something-year-old Black female with a degree or a diploma working in a bank somewhere in Kigali. What does the average Black female working in a bank in Kigali earn? What do they drive? Where do they live? What do they wear? What phone do they have? Okay, so if that's what the average is doing, then I'm going to push up my lifestyle to the average. That's a terrible idea. Terrible idea. You will definitely waste and use money doing that, but you will also most definitely destroy wealth doing that. Absolutely, positively, without a question. I want to share, here's another personal story. So I race cars, I love cars. I'm a V12 guy. There is, in my mind, there is very few things that equal in pleasure to the sound of a naturally aspirated V12. Oh man. And it's the engine note when you switch it on, it's that, oh! And I tell you what I think people don't appreciate about V12s, right? You gotta be a car person to get this. V12s generally make high revving engines. And think about a Ferrari, right? It's that high revving 10 and about 8,000, 9,000 revs. You just hear that purr. I tell you, man, I'm absolutely convinced that on the gateways of heaven, St. Peter is sitting there revving the engines of a V12. I'm convinced of it. I'm absolutely convinced of it, right? So you get the sense I love cars, race cars. Cars are my passion, they're my thing. But I look at the people in my peer group because of the cars I have and the cars I drive and the people I'm exposed to. And I have to be very careful not to allow myself to fall into the demographic trap. Generally, the people in my peer group who drive the cars I drive tend to be 15 to 20 years older than me. They are in their second or third business, or they're running 2 or 3 businesses at a point in time. They're working 18 hours a day, and they have had a 30-year track record of building up to the point when I met them. So I'm coming in and meeting this person. I can't compare myself to them. It's not going to work. They're at a very different stage in their life to where I am. And so this idea of demographic benchmarking is incredibly toxic if you want to create financial independence and wealth. Be very careful of this. What you want, if you want to create financial independence of wealth, is rather psychographic benchmarking. And so here's what psychographic benchmarking does. Psychographic benchmarking says, what are the things that I'm passionate about? What do I enjoy? What do I value? What do I aspire for? And what do I hope to do in future and leave behind? And then it says, who else mirrors these values that I have? So let's test this. What do I aspire for? Well, I personally, I aspire not to work, if I'm to be honest, guys. I don't want to work. I want to work, but I don't want to work. I want to be able to say no to work because I don't enjoy it. I want to be able to say no to an assignment because it doesn't turn me on. But to do that, I've got to be financially independent and free, right? Okay, cool. What else do I aspire for? I aspire for a 4-day work week, which means on a Friday, I want to do something like this, jump on a quick call, wear my beautiful African print when I'm done here, go to a nice car dealership, have a cup of coffee and stare at some beautiful V12 engines. That's what I want to do. Might read a book on a Friday, right? What else do I want to do? I want to be able to pick my kids up from school and take them out for ice cream and not worry about what time of day it is. How many calls am I getting in? Or am I missing out on any emails, right? Okay, so how do I do that? And who has done that? So as an investor, then there are different people I could look at. So if I look at somebody like Warren Buffett, definitely not the life that I want. 90-something years old, still putting in 14 hours a day, way too much pressure, way too much on the line. And by the way, I don't know why you need so many billions. You know what I want? I just want to be worth $1 billion. Not 2, not 3, not 4. $1 billion. $1 billion, if you put it in a money market account and you earn 8% on $1 billion, a lot of money. 8% on 100 million is 8 million. 8% on $1 billion is 80 million. So if you're worth $1 billion, assuming on pari passu basis, it's all in cash. If you're worth $1 billion in cash alone, cash and cash equivalents, as the accountants would say, and you've got that sitting in an investment instrument that's earning you 8% a year, you're making $80 million every single year without waking up in the morning. This is one of the reasons why people don't understand. If you ever look at why people go, why are the wealthy getting wealthier and the poor getting poorer? And then they'll talk about, if you listen to Bernie Sanders, he often talks about how billionaires continue to make more billions. It's because of the compound effect of making money. Listen to this, and I want you to remember this. My rabbi said this to me, my life changed. My rabbi said to me, he said, the hardest million you'll ever make is the first one. The hardest 10 million you'll ever make is the first 10. The hardest 100 million you'll ever make is the first 100. Why? Because once you've made that first million, what happens is you develop the disciplines of how to make a million, that by the time you make a second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth million, you know how to make a million, right? So the point about this is the reason the wealthy are continuously getting wealthier is just because of the compound effect of what that money looks like. And so I want you to ask yourself the question, guys, what are the psychographic groups that you're tapping into? For the young people in our conversation, let's just be honest here. Here's how you go test this. There's 3 exercises I want to give them for you to go and try. First, go to your WhatsApps and just go check the last 5 WhatsApps. Who are you talking to and what are you talking about? Go check that. If you're talking about gossip and who said what and who's trending where and who bought what for what and what latest brand of what is out, then that shows you everything about the conversations that you're having, what you're feeding your mind, and just the psychographic that you're at. Go check. Second thing you're going to do, if you're on social media, especially if you're on IG, go and check what your latest data on social media and IG looks like. Go and check the latest data on social media on Facebook. Who are you talking to? What groups are you in? What conversations are you having? Third, go to your YouTube. What videos are you watching? If I went into your computer right now or your phone and checked just those 3 things, I'd get all the data that I need about you. It would tell me what you find interesting, what you're reading, what you're thinking. And that tells me everything I need to know about your psychographic. So somebody who's into personal development and personal growth, their trends list will show you they're into personal development and personal growth. That's what they're doing and that's what they're reading. Do you know what I'm into? Reading religiously. I'll prove it to you. This is my current stack sitting in my home office of what I'm reading now. There. I mean, how many books is that, right? That's insane. But that's my current stacks of all the books that I'm reading right now as we speak. They go from personal finance to new ideas and new technology. Why? Because that stuff is important to me. So for me, that's like stuff that I enjoy. Psychographic. Guys, I'm cognizant of time. But what I really wanted to do here was just to add value. Add value. Woo! Talking about value. So one of the things to recognize, ladies and gentlemen, is that this very little idea of ours in the world called value is changing. Value is changing. And I think COVID has done a lot of work, by the way, to change how human beings assess, analyze, and understand this idea of value, right? The first thing we're noticing about how this idea of value is changing is it's changing along the lines of how people identify themselves. So whether it's Black Lives Matter in the US or the Green Parade in Sweden or the fight for gender equality in Ukraine, human beings, for the first time, want to be able to determine for themselves what the narrative of their identity should reflect. And this is for the first time in a long time. So the point is just understand that the idea of identity is changing. Second, the other thing that's changing is this idea of wealth. Now, there was a time when wealth was money. Wealth was riches. Wealth was size of bank account, etc., etc. But I've just made the point to you now that I think for a lot of us in the world today, wealth is actually time. Think about that. It's interesting, as human beings, we take our time, we spend our youth, we expand our health to acquire money. And then when we get old, we want to use that money to gain back our wealth because we're generally in terrible health conditions. And so I think one of the things we're seeing in the world today is human beings are redefining what does wealth look like. So can I ask a question? Do not answer this. This is a personal question for you. Make a note of it if you can, and then answer to yourself. What does wealth look like for you? Not for the world you're in, not for everybody else around you. Personal, mission, vision, goal statement for you. What does wealth look like for you? I can share with you mine, just top of mind. Fewer, more meaningful relationships, definitely. Fewer, but far more meaningful relationships. Deeply engaging conversations. Emotional connection and growth. Intellectual stimulation. That's what wealth looks like for me. Now, do you notice nowhere there did I say money? But if I move in that way, money generally tends to find me. Because if I'm going to have fewer, more meaningful relationships, it means I need to invest in relationships, but it also means I need to ask myself, who am I investing in those relationships with? Who am I talking to? Who's in my WhatsApp? What are the top 5 WhatsApps that I sent? If I want intellectually stimulating conversations, then by design, I can't hang around places where conversations are not intellectually stimulating. So who am I talking to? What are we talking about? Yeah? So this idea of wealth. Third is this idea of legacy. Ask yourself, for you, not for anybody else, what does legacy look like for you? What do you want to leave behind? I was raised in an era where what your parents left behind was typically a home, maybe some savings, but actually very, very little, because generally what happens is your parents work to make savings and then they retire and spend all of their savings. In part, what ends up happening is the children of those parents, you're often burdened with taking care of your parents. And I use the word burdened advisedly. I don't think about taking care of my elders as a burden. It's a privilege, but I use that word in the economic sense, that it's an additional economic burden on your pocket. So what does legacy look like for you? Just ask yourself that question. Fourth, this idea of the archetype of masculinity. This is changing in a big way. I loved the graph that was shared earlier by, the earlier keynote, this idea that women are outliving men. I wanted to quib and make the joke and go, yeah, you know why females are outliving men? And then I thought, no, Vusi, don't do it. It might get me into trouble. But, this idea that females are outliving men, but also that if you're generally in business with a female, they tend to be more prudent. They tend to be a lot more judicious with their money, a lot less ostentatious with the money, a lot more prudent in how women do planning. It's just the nature of it. It's not completely true, but it's the nature of it. So even around yourself, in your space and in your circle, just consider how much access to masculine energy that you have, and then how much access to the softer, and I use again the word softer more advisedly, but the softer, more maternal energy that you have, because it is a different complexion of energy when it comes to how you plan. And then finally, think about this idea of free. So not everything that you need to do in planning for your own personal life, particularly your own personal finances, needs to be paid for. Actually, a lot of this stuff is just free. There is a seminar, attend, free. If there is an access to a savings product, do it, free. In South Africa, we have a tax and a savings scheme, do that, free, right? So try to look for the places where you can get stuff for free. And the reason this is important is because one of the more aggressive ways of eroding wealth is through paying fees to access the systems of savings. So you have a bank account, how much does it cost you? You have an investment account, how much does that cost you? You have a trading account, how much does that cost you? You have a retirement savings account, how much does that cost you, right? Those costs cumulatively add up. And if you took those costs and put them into something that was free or freemium, you'd be very surprised how much wealth you can create in a very short space of time. So the point that I'm making here, quite simply, is you have to begin to think for yourself and to see for yourself how things are shifting and how things are changing. And then the fourth thing is to constantly question what you're seeing. A lot of us don't do this because we're not built this way. But everything you're seeing is a projection. Everything you're seeing is a projection. The literature you're reading, the news that you're watching is all a projection, right? And there are three perspectives. There's what happened, and a lot of us spending time understanding what happened. That's the science of hindsight. This is the past, this is where we come from, this is what happened. Then there's knowing what happened, what does it mean? That's the science of insight. But really what you're looking for is knowing what it means, what do I do? And that's the science of foresight. So I want you to ask for yourself, ask and answer for yourself, how much time do you spend looking at the world in which way? Are you a hindsight guy, an insight girl, or a foresight girl? Answer that for yourself. So how many conversations are you having with people where they're talking about new ways of doing things, new ideas, new technologies, new ways of earning income? That's foresight conversations. People generally talking about what happened yesterday, that's hindsight conversations. People analyzing, all the analysts that talk about what it means, that's insight conversations. And so what I'm saying here is be careful not to get caught in the trap of looking at what happened and extrapolating what it means. You have to look at what happened, extrapolate what it means, and say, knowing what I know and what it means, what do I do? Foresight, foresight, foresight. So constantly question what you see. And finally, you have to seek to be actively disappointed by your heroes. I think especially those of us who are creating wealth in the continent today as young people, we're a new generation. A lot of us are looking up to people who come from a different time. And so it is about constantly seeking to be disappointed by our heroes. I want you to watch this video for context.
People who've been in the rocketry business for decades, who say about you that you don't know what you don't know.
Well, I suppose that's true of anyone. How can anyone know what they don't know?
But when critics say you can't do this, your answer to them is,
we've done it.
He's done it in partnership with NASA, which has given SpaceX technical advice and a contract worth up to $1.6 billion, mostly for 12 cargo flights to the space station. But SpaceX's lack of experience bothers some NASA legends like Apollo astronauts Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan. They've testified to Congress that the Obama administration's drive to commercialize space compromises safety and eventually cost the taxpayers.
Now is the time to overrule this administration's pledge to mediocrity.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight and the way that you're developing it. And I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine. So it's really tough. You know, I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
So let me make the comment. Did you hear what he said? He says, they inspired you to do that. Elon Musk says, yes. He says, and to see them casting stones in your direction, this is difficult. I froze that image because I think it's a very telling image. That's probably the most human image all of us have ever seen of Elon Musk. This guy is Iron Man. Literally, he features in the movie Iron Man, right? Because even the character of Tony Stark is just so likened to him. This is the guy who grows up in the southern tip of the darkest continent in the world, in a small little country called South Africa, in a small little dorpie called Pretoria. He leaves here as a young boy in his teenage years. He moves over to the United States. At the end of his education, he starts into this thing called technology. He has 1 or 2 startups with meager success. He creates this business with a friend of his called Max Levchin called X.com. It's a fintech platform that's a payment platform. Some years later, they merged with another business called PayPal, and they decided to rename the whole business called PayPal. He becomes the CEO, Max, the CFO or the COO. They build PayPal and they sell it. And today's stories are told about the PayPal mafia and how many of those guys are some of the foremost investors in technology in the world today. But he doesn't stop there. In the early 2000s, he buys into this little nondescript battery-powered battery-powered lithium energy producing automotive company called Tesla that had a single product, the Tesla Roadster, which wasn't a technological feat. Battery technology at the time was at its early stages. People laughed at him, said, you're a tech guy, what are you doing in automotive? Yet today, we celebrate him. He has fundamentally transformed automotive. Every single global manufacturer today has a strategy for electric cars. If you look at the units that he produces relative to the market cap, his is the wealthiest stock of automotive stocks the world over, without question. It's close on 20 years later. In that same time, he decides that he's going to make space travel affordable. And he buys into that startup called SpaceX. And that's the project that you just seen there. There was a time SpaceX was completely out of runway. They had 3 rockets left. And one of those 3 rockets had to fly up and land perfectly. Otherwise, they would have lost their contract. That business would have closed down, and it happened. One of them did fly up and land perfectly. And the story about SpaceX today is told. I was in New York a year and a half ago, I want to say, and I watched his Neuralink presentation where he was launching this business and platform called Neuralink. For those of you who are unaware, they're playing, remember the movie The Matrix, when Neo goes down and he sleeps and they plug the thing into Neo's head and then they code into his brain jujitsu. And then he wakes up and he says, I know Kung Fu. And then Morpheus says, then show me, right? You can tell I watched the movie a couple of times. So this business called Neuralink actually is playing around with the same idea, which is, can you plug a chip into the brain of a human being And rather than you and I have to go through massive learning curves of new information, that information can be coded in. So imagine if you could educate and teach a doctor in 12 hours rather than 7 years. Just sleep on a machine, plug the thing in, and code into your brain everything you need to know about being a doctor. You wake up, and all the knowledge and information you need to know about being a doctor is in your brain. It's not a new idea, guys. Remember the movie Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone? 1993. Remember, and there's a scene in the movie where, you can tell I'm a movie geek. There's a scene in the movie where Sandra Bullock is sitting next to Sylvester Stallone, and there's the Latino fellow at the back, I forget his name, and they sing the song, Hot Dogs, oh my hot dogs. But in the movie, Sylvester Stallone is frozen in 1995. He's woken up in the year 2036 in a place called San Angeles, right? And he gets called into the San Angeles Police Department, and he wakes up one day and he all of a sudden can knit, but he doesn't know how he learned how to knit, and it's because while he was frozen, they coded into his brain this thing about knitting. Well, it's come a long way since then, because the guys at Neuralink have now been testing this and have found it to be successful in pigs. So they planted a few chips in pigs and they coded in some behaviors, and the pigs' behaviors have changed. Now it first starts with pigs, then it'll go into primates, it'll be monkeys and the rest of it. And in a couple of years' time, you might have human trials. And I think it's not unforeseeable that in our lifetime, you'll be able to download and implant a chip in your brain. And with that chip in your brain, just like you do on your phone, anytime you want to change a behavior, you'll download an operating system. I don't like the way I spend money, download operating system that changes my money spending behaviors. I have an anxiety problem, download operating system. Huge. What's the point that I'm making? And it's just an inspirational note to leave you guys with. If you want to do new things, and you want to push the boundaries of what's possible, by definition, you're going to have to leave behind the behaviors of the people who've taught you what you know, which means you have to actively seek to be disappointed by your heroes. So what I hope for you is the courage to follow your heart, the tenacity to see things through, and the bravery to always know that no matter how tough things get, there's always a bit of sunshine over the mountain. All right, that's my time. I always wanted to say this. That's my time. Back to studio.
Yes, we are back to studio. Vusi, thank you so much. There is a challenge here for you. If you're still on, please. Our MD is Richard. Our MD is Richard Biarugaba. So the challenge is pronounce his name. They want people want you to get even the way you pronounce your name. Vusi?
Vusi, that's it, yeah.
Yeah. Pronounce our MD's name, Richard Biarugaba. And that laugh. Still waiting.
This is you getting me back. Okay, okay. All right, you win.
Just like that. Thank you so much, Vusi. Thank you so much for. Thank you so much for that, for those words of. There are 2 or 3 questions. There are actually not. There are quite a number of questions, but we'll pick out 2 or 3, and then maybe one from the audience, the live audience here, and you could attend to those. The rest we shall be sending you a very huge file where you can just jot down some notes, and we shall share with this with the social media group. 1, I'm just trying to pick out the best. Someone says you've mentioned and noted that your greatest blessing is your daughters. So the question starts. Tell us about their mother. Question 1. Question 2. This time we need an answer. The laugh won't cut it. Question 2. How are you raising them to cultivate success? And they say legacy. And number 3. Are you willing to increase their number since your wealth is increasing?
Sorry, what was number 3? I didn't hear number 3.
Are you willing to increase the number of your children since your wealth is increasing? Just attend to that, then I'll give my audience a chance to give you 2 other questions, and then we can close it at that. Yes, Vusi.
Give me a second. I want to show you guys something. Hold on.
No problem. Shadrach, kindly give us that shot. Yeah. As you come in, there are some comments here we are getting.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Okay.
Yeah, so check this out. I want to share this with you guys because I feel really passionately about this, and I'm sure you can see my energy is like really just, I'm re-energized, right? I think one of the best things we can do for our kids is to teach them financial planning and financial independence at an early age. Because what happens is we try to teach prudent financial planning to adults. But usually by the time people are adults, behaviors are set in, and it's much, much harder to try and change people's behaviors. So I have a running system with my kids. I'm going to show it to you guys now. They have a series of activities that they do. And for those activities, they get a prize, and that prize is money. And we have a tax system, and I tax them on the money, and I show them how much they have left, and then I offer them interest if they let me keep the money. So I want you to picture this. I'll say to my son, mow the lawn. No, he's too young to mow the lawn. So water the lawn, right? He likes that. He likes watering the lawn. And then my son will water the lawn. And for that, I'll pay him 20 Rand, what is the equivalent of $1.50, say, right? And then I'll say to him, I'm paying you this amount of money, $1.50, but you have to pay me tax on it. So what you earn is $1.50 minus tax. He's 10 years old, 19 years old. So now he understands the concept of tax. He hates tax, by the way, as we all do, but he understands this concept of tax. Then I'll say to him, that's your money left. You can take it now, cash, it's yours. Or you can let me, as the banker, keep it. And if I keep it for you, you earn interest of X amount every day. And so what he's learning now, that second part is really important. What he's learning now is delayed gratification. I can take the money now and spend it, or if I let dad keep the money grows over a period of time. I'm not making this up. Here is the little write-up. You can see it there. Amma is my daughter, Muzi is my son, the prize money that they've earned this week, the amount of tax that they have to pay, the prize money left, the interest that they're earning, the number of days I've had that money, the amount of money they've earned in interest, and the price of the money left.
Wow.
So the point I'm making is we have to, in our own homes, begin to cultivate this culture of prudent financial planning and prudent financial discipline. That was the point that I wanted to make.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There were 2 other questions. Are you willing to increase their number? And tell us about their mother.
I don't know how to answer the first question, but on the third question, am I looking to increase my number of kids? The answer is a big no. Kids are, I think kids are an incredible blessing, but boy, are they expensive. And the parents in the room, let's have an honest conversation about kids. How much are you paying on your school fees? How much are you paying on medical aid? Jeez. How much do you pay on extramural activity? Yeah, kids are really, really expensive. And I expect that they're going to get progressively more expensive too, right? So the reason I've gotten wealthier is because I choose to spend less money. So no, I'm not looking for more children. Although I'm sure there are people who are willing to donate the vacuum to make that child, but it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll just take a question or 2 from my distinguished panel here. Any? These gentlemen and ladies have earned the right to ask Vusi a question. Anything, Richard, for Vusi?
No, actually, just thank you.
Please.
Well, first of all, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for the presentation, and I've learned quite a lot from what you say today. There are 1 or 2 things that we really share the thing about kids, the thing about getting them to invest quite early and learning how to do that. I've practiced that with my daughters. So I hope that the information you've been able to share with all our online guests, they've actually taken out of it. One of the things that I'm really keen about is the issue about data, and you sort of used quite a lot of that. We use that in our business here at the fund. We've seen really the advantages of data and using machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to predict some of the things that our customers are going to come up with. So my question for you in that space is, for a pension fund like ourselves, in terms of creativity, what else, apart from product, which I know is a big deal, but what else do you think our business could do in order to give more to our customers, considering that our pensioners will eventually need to come and get their money when they are stable. So what are the things that you might be able to think about which might help us?
Sorry, ask me that again. I want to make sure that I understand it. Is your question, what else could the business do to spur economic activity, but at the same time make sure that you've got enough fund liquidity for the pensioners as and when they retire and those funds become due? Did I understand that correctly?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great question. All right, I'm flying to Uganda. You and I are having coffee because that's a fantastic question. And I feel like there's actually a lot we could do there, right? So in South Africa, we've got something called Regulation 28. In Namibia, it's called Regulation 29, and it's part of the Pension Funds Act. Admittedly, I haven't read the Pension Funds Act of Uganda, so I come from a point of ignorance. But what we've been arguing for in South Africa is that pension funds have to be allowed to model their liquidity in such a way that they can make some medium to long-term venture investments, particularly in the growing sectors, right? So there are a couple of things I think we need to say here. First is that generally pension fund money and institutional money should not be going to venture type transactions because of the risk profile.
Yes.
But there's no reason we can't go towards medium-sized, industrialized businesses where, there's potential for that business to become much, much bigger, right? So I know it's collapsed now, but I think about the story of something like a Nakumat and how Nakumat was funded in the early days.
Yes.
I look now at a company like Dairyland and how Dairyland was funded in the early days. That was money that came from institutional investors that went into a medium-sized industrial business that could grow. The difficulty is always around how do you model the fund liquidity in such a way that as and when those liabilities become due, the fund is able to draw that money from the underlying investment vehicle. And I think that the key is around having the right partners. So as we speak, I'm busy spearheading a project for us to build a fund of funds. We've already chosen a partner in Uganda. So I'm very happy for us to take that conversation forward, because in effect, what we're doing is I'm bringing on board global capital, and that global capital often is developmental capital so that we can soften the risk for the institutional investors in country. And that changes the profile of the transactions we can do. And then what we look for is a local limited partner, a pension fund, say, to meet us in terms of the capital that we're investing, and would find a local asset manager to invest in the underlying assets in that country, right? It's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
But there's some very exciting movements happening in this space, and I'd love for us to see how we take that conversation forward.
Very exciting. Definitely would love to do that. So we got you. Does anybody else have a question for him in this audience? Yes.
Good morning, Vusi. Mine is very simple. You talked about the culture of the country as defining or as definitive of many aspects of life. The third aspect of culture that you talked about was actually specifically saying that the young entrepreneur, people that you meet with here do not or actively shy away from anything political. One of the first, when you built up your presentation, you actually started from the perspective of, the amount of power and all. And we know that some of these are actually political decisions, or some of these should be driven from the political arena. Looking at the red movement that you have down south, and looking at the political class that we have here locally, you find that the young, brilliant, able and capable actively shy away from engaging in political discussions and leave that to be politically correct to those that are looking for a source of income. What can we as the young people do to actually bridge that gap? Because if we fail to plug out the political question, we will still never get anywhere. What have you been able to do, and how would you inspire us to actually take a keen interest in what goes on in that space? And my name is Emmanuel Mwaka. Thank you.
Hi, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, brother. I think, in the words of Plato, the thing about politics is, so I'm going to give you two quotes. First, the one Plato says, if you don't involve yourself in politics, you have to be, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that if you don't involve yourself in politics, then you have to be content with being managed by lesser men. So that's the first quote, which is an interesting one. This idea of lesser men, and men here, of course, is gender agnostic. It references humankind. And I think it was Gandhi that says something like, when people elect idiots into power, they must recognize that those idiots reflect their own levels of idiocy. Right? So I think, and that last one's probably just in jest. The problem with politics in Africa, let's be honest here, is it's uninspiring. I'm not inspired by politics in Africa. I find a lot of African politicians spend 90% of their time talking about the past. They don't talk about the future. And it's because Africa has had so many problems in the past that's what they talk about, is the past. Where we come from, what happened, and who owes who what, and what was wrong, and what is the injustice, and how do we redress that injustice? I don't see a lot of African politicians talking about the future. What does the future of the continent look like? What does the future of your own country look like? And so I think the reason you're finding young people uninspired to get into politics is just because the conversation is uninspiring. And then the second thing to say at a personal level is that it's scary, guys. It's scary. It's shit. Politics is dirty. Dirty. And we constantly expect our political system to bring the best of society to the fore. It doesn't. Our political systems tend to bring the most ruthless fighters to the fore. It brings some of the most darkest elements to the fore because of the way the political system is built. It's politics. It's dirty. So people make up lies, they make up stories, they say things that are not true. It's Goebbels 101. It's create a narrative and constantly say that narrative, and then people believe it. So the reason you find young people uninspired to get into politics is because I get the sense that young people just can't be bothered to be in a world of lies and made up stories and defend things that are just not true. There are far better areas where we'd like to expand our time and our energy and our creative energy. But the risk with it is because we are not involved, we're then therefore not in charge of the direction. And we've fooled ourselves into thinking that not being involved means we are unaffected. Shit, that's so powerful. I should write it down. We fooled ourselves into thinking that not being involved means we are unaffected, which is just not true. You can sit on the sidelines and watch the debate happen. You can have your own personal points of view and comment on WhatsApp groups and social media and Twitter. But at the end of the day, the people in power are in charge, and they make decisions that affect you and I. So if we are going to be affected, maybe we need to be involved as well. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Vusi, I've got one comment to make on that, because I'm a big believer that eventually, and I'll say this a little bit controversially, that eventually we can make the government irrelevant. Can we? Because I believe if we do the things we need to do, if the whole of the business community creates, if we create the jobs, if we create a way of life, and then we leave the government to do their thing. Because I think there's so much power in the things that we else can do, you know, as businesses, as people. And just leave the government to do their role, which I think should really be around regulation. And then get the whole world going without necessarily getting them to disrupt. Because I think that will happen eventually, if you really think about it. Your thoughts?
I agree with you. And it's probably it's interesting, our thinking is so much aligned. I think it has a lot to do with where the economics of the countries that we live in are, right? So we have the potential to certainly make politics irrelevant, but to do so, we need the economics to hold.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, all human beings want the same thing. You want a country that's safe. You want work that's meaningful. You want relationships that matter. You want to leave a legacy that's worth leaving. And you want your time on this little planet Earth to be fun and enjoyable. And generally the best way to do that is through economic and financial freedom, right? I suppose the difficulty is that for many of our economies, political prowess drives economic freedom. So I know in South Africa, that's definitely the case to a certain extent in your country too. I remember in Malawi, they had something called Cashgate 3 years ago, which was just unbelievable. But one of the unfortunate things about our continent is that a disproportionate amount of wealth is created through political connection, rather than being created through free market systems.
Yeah.
And so that makes it very difficult for people who are competency-driven, talent-driven, to want to exist in those spaces and to want to make an impact. But I fully agree with your thought. It's how do we make governments irrelevant? It's an interesting idea.
Thank you so much. So I'll hand over to you, Apollo.
Thank you, Vusi. Thank you so much. We are winding down this. Questions have been coming. How do we participate? How do we get into this? In a little while, I'll be giving you the links. I'll be giving you how you can participate, who can participate, from where, what we are going to be doing when the next program is starting. Right after the closing remarks, we first have the closing remarks from ICEA. ICEA is a partner in this. They have co-sponsored this along with NWealth. NWealth is the hosting partner. They have hosted our online classes right from inception up to now. I don't want to call it free, but no one has paid for it yet. Thank you so much, NWealth. Let's have closing remarks from Emmanuel Marker. Sorry, he's here.
Thank you very much, Headmaster. I almost wouldn't know how to start with the closing remarks after a very engaging and mentally stimulating session from Vusi. I think, Vusi, if some of us had a choice, you would be in our circle. But I hope that you'd also want to have us in your circle to have mentally stimulating conversations. But my name is Emmanuel Mwaka. I head ICEA in Uganda. I'm a loyal and firm believer in the relevance of the fund. And I see to it that for all those I live and work with, they are fully compliant with the fund, because saving is a way of life. And if it's mandatory, you must tick off that box before you think of anything else. I'd really like to start by appreciating NSSF management for this very great and noble initiative of financial literacy for members at a time when you and me need it the most. A time when the economy, local and global, and as we've heard from Vusi, and all we knew about safety is actually topsy-turvy. The holistic and practical approach demonstrated through the relevant topics and brilliant panelists all across the 6-month journey of financial literacy is something that we do not take for granted. And I think if I had the authority, I would say this is actively putting to productive use our resources. We're thankful for the partnership that ICEA has been offered and that we are showing cause for. And I know that we will continue to be happy to walk this journey with you. So thank you. I'll use the titles that Patrick used, SGL. I will stop at that. Thank you, the headmaster. Thank you, the LC1. I'm sure there are many other acronyms. But really, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to work with you. We believe at ICEA that big things actually have small beginnings. And the small beginnings are what is effectively shown today. From the statistics that Jean shared, 56% of retirees get advice, financial advice, from their family. It's sad because if we are to flip it and look at the level of literacy in Uganda, you realize that a lot of this is what in the technical space we call garbage in, garbage out. No wonder we only have about 2%. Sorry, we have about 4% having their funds, retirement funds, after 4 years. But at ICEA Life, we live and breathe matters financial protection. We plug in to offer shorter-term solutions to enable you plan your financial milestones along life's journey. We're a conduit through which you can turn your dreams into reality. I'll take a quick story about a little lady, Mama Faith in Arua, who took a small total education plan, paying just under 100,000 shillings to ensure her 4 children complete their education and become better than her, a mere teacher. Just like many of the children who went through her hands, she saw a bright future for her children. As fate would have it, the one thing she desired the most is the one that triggered a depression and ultimately her death, when her eldest daughter was sent back home for lack of school fees just before the pandemic set in, after she failed to get a salary because schools had been closed. Her dream now lives on through the total education plan. For even without monthly income in her home, her children can't and will go to school courtesy of the policy she took. We live out our promises. Preparation for life after retirement may sound cliche, but it's certainly coming faster than we think. At ICEA, we offer viable solutions to diversify investments and earn monthly income for one's lifetime after retirement through our annuity plan. And a quick story on this: when I had discussions with a brilliant and exemplary retired and young man, a cane farmer in Masindi, I promised him that if he invested his portfolio by ensuring that he ticks off the box of diversification, by including a small annuity plan, he would live long, a life of no worry. He would focus on making things work with his farm, with his sugarcane plantation, without worrying where his next meal or utility bill payment would come from, leave alone unplanned for medical expenses. This gentleman, because of the advice and because of the decisions that he took, came out a winner in the NSSF Friends with Benefits Season 3. Credible research has shown us that 2 major causes of early death in retirement are poverty and loneliness. And poverty leads to loneliness. No matter how many wives you have, if you can't put food on the table, you will stay lonely. At ICEA, we're passionate about alleviating old age poverty and enabling retirees live a comfortable life during retirement without fear that their funds will run out. our quote from the community plan would do to ensure your funds outrun you no matter what. Being in the insurance space, of course, we are a business that does well by doing good for you and me who are listening to me now. Talk to us today. There will be obstacles, doubters along the way, but with hard work, as we've seen from the brilliant story of Elon Musk, there are no limits. And at whatever stage in life you are, we would like to walk the journey with you. As I said, at some point, big things start with small beginnings. I'd like to congratulate the 678 cohort that have graduated today with financial literacy. Congratulations, you're the reason we are here today. You're the reason we have Vusi with us. You're the reason why we've been inspired significantly. And as I conclude, at ICA, we believe that for every life-changing moment, we are always better together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are having cohorts. We shall start in January. Our next intake in January, but the link is coming up right now in the next few minutes. But let me recognize some partners as NWealth you get online. I want to recognize Bank of Uganda, CMA, IRA, NFA, Microfinance Support Center, the Uganda Industrial Research Institute. All these are fundamental. The Naluima farm, the government farm at Entebbe, all these have been instrumental in our field visits, and they have given us partnerships that can lend a hand to our members. I would like to call for 1 minute from Simon of NWealth to give his remarks as Patrick gets ready with our last story for the day. Patrick is our story man at NSSF. Yes. Kindly, Shadrach. Simon.
Of Learning, CEO and NSF Uganda, grateful for the opportunity of partnership, and we are quite delighted to partner with NSF Uganda and bring this financial literacy program to the membership of NSSF. This is quite a transformational moment, and I know that the learning that we've had today in a big way is going to impact the community around in scaling up their economic well-being. I think the challenge is to translate value by putting into action the learning that we've had today, and NWealth Financial Services Limited remains committed to this cause in partnership with the NSF Uganda. Thank you again. We will keep engaging.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you so much for the continuous engagement and the continuous hosting of all our classes. Allow me to invite, it's my privilege and honor. Richard had the privilege and honor to invite Vusi. I have the privilege and honor to invite our own Vusi, Patrick Ayuta.
Thank you very much. I know standing between me and you, or maybe between lunch and you, is me. So I'll try to make it as short as I can. I think I can't add to whatever Vusi has said, to just dilute it. Maybe I'll just finalize with this. And many of you are familiar with this story from the good book. A sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seeds. And he says, some of them fell on the dry, hard ground. They didn't germinate. Some of them fell on soil that was a bit thin. As it began to grow, the thorns grew up and took it away. And some of you have been here hearing it, so excited. Right now you're thinking about spending that money, you're thinking about whatever else you need to do, the bigger car and so on, and it will die. And it says, but some fell on the good seeds. And the result of that was 100-fold, 1,000-fold of what they had planted. And what Vusi was telling us today, two things: dare to dream, and then walk towards that dream. So whatever you are passionate about, dare to dream and begin to walk towards that dream. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's at this time that we are bringing a close to this. One announcement: the graduates, please, you'll get your certificate and the hamper that goes with it. It will come to you. Just keep engaging us on the WhatsApp page that we created for you. Let's get your addresses. We don't want to get you in one place for the fear of exposure or to COVID. So we'll get Safe Border and all the other providers will help us get this to you. We are currently enrolling a teachers cohort which is going to start in December, specifically for teachers, and we are mostly worried about their financial wellness, their mental well-being. So the teachers cohort, look out for the link. There is a link that is being posted on our media pages. Just go to that, go to that and click, and you get in there. Thank you so much, Vusi. Thank you so much, NSSF. Thank you so much, NWealth. Thank you so much, ICEA. Thank you so much, all the other providers. And also a very, very big thank you to the team that we work with at NSSF, all the facilitators that saw this coming to life. We thank you so, so much. Thank you for this, and have a good day.
Space travel is not that complicated. It's really all about the numbers.